give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Ball Street. It is the Draftdaq, motherfucking NBA Draft Podcast. My name is Corey Tulliva. I am your host, and I am here, as always, this time for the full episode with my guy, Albert, Garbage Time Game. Albert, how we doing today?
Dude, I'm doing well. It's good to be back. Shouts to Rucker for, doing a half job of, filling in for me last week. I know what did he say when he came on? He was like, this is like Michael Jordan coming off the the guy has the deepest voice on planet Earth. But shouts to Rucker for filling in. Love you, brother.
He held it down. But this is not, our traditional, two-way match. It's another triple threat. We got a special guest, first-time guest. I think for the first time, we had a really good convo when we held that No Ceilings Twitter Spaces. So special guest joining the show for the first time. We have Stone Hansen, co-host of the Upside Swings podcast. Stone, what's going on, my man? How we doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed a lot of the No Ceilings content. So I'm happy to be on your guys' podcast. Cool experience because I don't think I've been on No Ceilings since you guys have become No Ceilings. So this is sort of my first intro to you guys, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, we're excited to have you, and I'm probably this might be the most excited I've been about an episode because we're gonna cover Jaime Jaquez Jr., who is one of my favorite prospects to watch in the class. He might not be the hottest name going around town right now, a little under the radar guy, but fellas, we got some time until draft night, so we're trying to cover all the bases. Jaime Jaquez Jr. is a UCLA wing, 20 years old right now, 21 years old on draft night, 6'7", 225, reported 6'9" to 6'10" wingspan, nothing official that I found. This year, he is averaging 12.7 points per game, 5.6 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists to 1.5 turnovers, half block a game, 1.1 steals per game, shooting 46.5% from the field, 33.3% from deep, and 69% from the free throw line. Nice. True shooting percentage, 53.3%. He's got a PER 20.1. All right, stock price. Preseason, ESPN had him at 28. The Athletic had him at 21. Bleacher Report had him at 42. SB Nation didn't have him ranked. That is an average price, 40.6. Currently, ESPN has him at 50. The Athletic has him at 38. Tankathon has him at 37. Basketball News has him at 46. Bleacher Report did not have him ranked. No Ceilings. Guys, we had him at 18. So we messed with the curve a little bit. But that's an average stock price of 42.4. So draft stock actually not all that dissimilar to what it was earlier in the year. Went from 40.6 to 42.4. So, Stone, you're a guest. I'm going to let you go first. Is Jaquez Jr. stock price too high, too low, or is it just right at 42.4?
Too low for me, I think. I thoroughly enjoy what Jaquez brings as somebody who I think is just a really valuable contributor to winning basketball when you watch him. And that at times I think can be difficult to verbalize, but I think if you just look at the film and watch the tape, there's just a lot of things that he does good, not great, that I think lead to winning plays. And I would personally have him ranked probably in the mid-20s somewhere. I think he's a solid first-round guy near the middle to end of the first because of the reasons I've already said.
All right, Albert, too high, too low, or just right?
I'm going to say too low. And the reason for that is on my board, which I haven't updated in a couple of weeks, but it is what it is. I have him. Where do I have? I have him 18th actually. So 40 to 18 is actually a pretty big difference, which is actually where we have him at No Ceilings Interestingly enough, I guess I'm right there in the median. But yeah, man, I really like him a lot, and like I'm just gonna kind of resonate with what Stone just said. I think he offers a lot, and this episode may end up becoming just like a Triple J love hour, but I, I he just does a lot of winning things on the floor, and there's a lot to like. And I feel like if you watch him, I just can't understand why you wouldn't like him at the very least. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna triple that. It's a low. He's a buy at this price. I think you're getting great value if you land him at that point. I looked at my big board, which I've updated pretty recently. Been quite a bit of movement. It's going to lead to some exciting conversations, I'm sure, at the next No Ceilings big board meeting. I'm at 19, so I'm right there with you. I think he's around that top 20 range,
yeah,
just because, like Stone said, he does all these winning things. And also, I just think he's got like the right frame and skill set for where the game is and where it's heading. And while he may not have that same standout elite skill that maybe some of the other prospects in this draft have, he's one of these dribble, pass, shoot guys, and he defends. He's versatile. He's switchable. He's all the things we're going to get into. That I think that if you get him in that second round area, I think you're really getting a valuable contributor. And I think he's going to probably kill interviews, coming off 2 really successful seasons. And when he gets into like workouts and all this, I'm sure his body's going to look, chiseled and all that. I think that he might ultimately end up impressing one of these teams at the end of the first round that are maybe a little bit more ready to win now and ultimately go as a first rounder. Before we get into the scouting report, Albert, you saw him live,
yes,
right? You had an encounter, a close encounter with him. Up close and personal, what did he look like body wise?
So the first night we were there in Las Vegas, Rucker and I, we were on the floor for warm-ups, and he came out of the bathroom and walked right by me, and I was like, "Dear God, this guy's gigantic."
You're pretty big. You're pretty tall.
Yeah. I'm 6'2", 6'2". I'm somewhere 6'2", 6'2.5". I don't know, but he was like legit like 5 inches on me, and I was kind of looking up at him. But the thing with him, Corey, is it's not just the height. What you just mentioned, the body, just the physique that this kid has. He walked by, and I was like, "Oh, this is like Gordon Hayward in college." Like this guy, his shoulders were huge, and he just walked by, and I was like, "Wow, he's a physical specimen." So, I went into that tournament thinking about what you said and how you're like, "Hey, look out for Jaquez," and he totally won me over. So yeah, but it first started with him walking by from the bathroom. The kid is ripped.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to, because I think it comes across on screen, but seeing so many of these guys in person, like I just saw Jaden Hardy, and
Right.
Jaden Hardy has an awesome frame. Like that dude's shoulders, he's got shoulders like Tatum, but he's probably a little smaller than he's listed at. Like I don't think he's much smaller, but he looked more of that like tiny combo guard height rather than like legit shooting guard height. And that's valuable because a lot of times that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily come across on screen. Dyson Daniels, while he's fairly tall, he's got the longest neck of anybody I've ever seen. So I don't know what that means as far as what his like length is gonna equal out to, or if he's just one of these guys who's got that extra, the height that doesn't really matter functionally to basketball. So the Jaquez being the actual size for a guy that I think is going to be valuable in the NBA is important. All right, Stone. We love starting the scouting report out with shooting, and I think a wing like Jaquez, it's going to be one of the swing skills for him. So off the bounce, catch and shoot. What are your opinions on Jaquez as a shooter, and how do you see him fitting in as a shooter in the league?
Yeah, I think the motion, the mechanics, everything looks very clean to me. I think a lot of his shooting flaws, I guess you could say, because they are below average in some respects, comes down to the arc on his shot. I feel like a lot of his shots are pretty flat arcing. They tend to be very like level with the rim. And if you watch, a lot of his misses tend to come off the front of the rim because they just can't get over the top of the front of the rim. So I think the low arc is sort of what is holding him back. And I think that's something that is, pretty manageable at the next level when you get him in with a shooting coach over time. The other thing is maybe like the elevation. I feel like he doesn't get a ton of gravity off his shot, and that may be what's sort of leading to this low arcing shot. But again, I feel like the mechanics, there's nothing really wrong with it. There's not like too major of a hitch, maybe a small hitch. I couldn't really tell. I don't know if that's something you guys picked up on, sort of like in the upper end of his torso when he's shooting. But I think as like a fundamental base, the mechanics are okay. They need some tweaking, like I said. And I think the most concerning aspect of that to me is the shooting gravity, because that's something I don't think is as easily fixable at the next level.
Albert, when you were watching him shoot around pregame, what did the mechanics look like?
So for me, I felt like Stone just read off my notes because he said so many of the things that I saw in person that you see on tape. I thought the mechanics looked really, really good. When you watch him shoot in practice, everything looks fluid. He looks really confident. Same thing in the games, to be honest, for me, when I was there watching him live. The thing that I did want to say, like Stone mentioned, except for me, like I saw a little bit of a hitch when he was taking free throws. I don't know if you guys felt the same. When he's at the free throw line, there's a little bit of a hitch I felt like when he kind of like takes like a weird hesitation with the ball by his face. Was something that I noticed, and I was wondering maybe that's something he's got to work out and clean up a little bit. But overall, the thing that Stone said about the shot being flat, I wrote it right here. I totally agree with that. I was wondering actually, so what I wrote here in my notes, I was going to ask you, Corey. I was wondering if the shot being flat is a product of his footwork, or is it the lack of elevation? Or I was wondering what you saw and why he was flat, because you see it a lot in like the 1 dribble, 2 dribble pull-ups. He'll be pretty flat on those, hit front rim on those. So obviously me, I'm not some shooting savant, shooting guru. So I didn't want to ask you what you thought about that, because there are times when it can be pretty short. But as Stone mentioned, I do agree it is something that I think he can fix. But wondering what you saw, Corey.
Hear me? Sorry. Can you guys hear me? All right. I think that when you're talking about shooting and like why is somebody I think it's not always the same reason. I think you have to kind of individualize shooting and breaking it down. I think for him, I do think that the fact that he doesn't get a ton of elevation probably contributes to it. A lot of times it's as simple as guys just need to shoot up more instead of out. With Jaquez, it probably, like, where it worries me that it's a little flat, and front rimming it isn't necessarily something that I'm super worried about, because I think consistent misses are good problems to have because you can identify how to fix things. But when you're a little bit flat and your front rimming sometimes misses at the college line, that there's an adjustment period when you're extending your range out back a couple of feet. So that is a worry as far as like the shot being flat and it kind of also being short sometimes. But functionally, I think it's pretty smooth. Like I didn't necessarily notice any kind of hitch that made me go, oh, this is something specific he needs to fix there. To me, it's just like him getting with a shooting coach, an off season of NBA training, and working out just the little things that he's got to fix to get that to an NBA level. But like, it's pretty smooth, and it's just for me, it's just reps. He's also not a guy who's launching like a ton of shots. So like the volume and how he's getting his shots aren't always going to be like in a way that he can be super in rhythm with some of these things. So because he's very much so a guy who lets the game come to him. He's very rarely like forcing it unless he really feels like he needs to kind of go on a little stretch for UCLA. but they're talented enough, and Juzang's kind of in that mode always, it seems. So I'm not really worried about his shooting. It's the 33% is down a little bit from last year, but it's more in line with his first year. So it's probably around where he's going to average out. I don't think he's going to be a 38, 39, 40% three-point shooter anytime soon in the league. But if he's a 35, 36% three-point shooter where you're going to close out on him, you're not just going to let him shoot and brick open shots, then that's going to lead to some of the other stuff that he does well and allow him to create. So the shot, I think, is something that will be a slow grind. Like, even though I think he can be a guy who can contribute early because he does so many things, I don't think he's a guy that's going to come in and have like a Franz Wagner type impact to where you're like counting on him to be one of the main guys on your team. And if you are counting on him to be one of the main guys on your team, that probably says more about the team that he went to rather than where he should be at in his development and how fast he started contributing. Let's talk about his kind of creation ability, and I'll kick it back to you, Stone. Do you think that at the NBA level he's going to have, again, not necessarily early, but a few years into the league, do you think he's going to be able to develop any kind of self-creation ability?
I don't think so, and I'm not sure it's not really by fault of his own. I think it's, or it is, I guess, but it's also by role, I think. I don't think he's going to have a lot of the same responsibilities that he does at the collegiate level than he does at the NBA level. I'm thinking in terms of like actual role, not necessarily a player comparison, more along the lines of like a Kenrich Williams or like a Kyle Anderson, who isn't necessarily going to be taking like a lot of shots. I think this is probably the highest amount of volume that Jaquez will be taking at the collegiate level right now. I don't think he'll ever have these sort of opportunities at the NBA level. So I don't think self-creation is necessarily a huge knock on him for the predicted role that I think he'll have in the league. But I think against like maybe bigger forwards, or if he's playing power forward against some of the bigger guys, that he can get a step on them. His burst is pretty average, I think. I think a lot of the athleticism is sort of below average, but I think the burst is right at about like an average level in regards to his frame and size. So I think against bigger opponents, if he's able to get switched onto them, he can take them to the rim. But I don't think a lot of like self-creation from the perimeter and like step backs or anything are things we should really be looking at for the given role that he'll probably have.
I actually think that he's kind of an underrated athlete. Like, he's not like let me go, put it on your head type highlight athlete, although I do think he's capable of that sometimes. But I think like when he gets the ball and maybe not even first step, but just like off of a dribble, a little bit of momentum, I don't know if you'd consider it his first step. Maybe it's that in between his first and second step. Like, I think he can kind of turn on the NOS a little bit, and he's got like sneaky like blow by ability in a straight line. And I think like you see him like against Arizona, he was at the 3-point line at one point, and he finished with this like crafty little lefty layup, but he was there and at the rim like in a flash. So I do think he has the ability sometimes. And it's a little sneaky because he is kind of a slower, more methodical player. But I like what you said about how he can kind of take advantage of, in that sense of like kind of more slow, plodding, more traditional type big guys, which, if you're marking him as a four-man in the league, which I think he'll certainly play some of, there are going to be times when teams are playing, a heavy switch scheme where he gets a 5 on him, and I think he's going to be able to take advantage of that. But what I kind of like about him, and again, I don't think he's going to be this high volume self-creation type guy, but I do kind of think he's got old man pickup game where he's just kind of doing whatever he wants at times, like just playing it by ear, whatever the circumstances. You want to go under on the screen, all right, fuck it, I'll pull up from behind the arc. I'll knock down the three. You want to put a big on me? All right, let me blow by you real quick. I'll take advantage of it. Oh, you're gonna put a point guard on me? All right, I'm taking you down to the block and I'm getting mine in the post. So I do think, like, maybe not in the traditional sense of self-creation that you're thinking, like Cade Cunningham has been kind of on a rampage with over the last month or so, but kind of in like an advantageous, I got a mismatch right here. Like, let me take advantage of the mismatch and kind of create a little bit. This might be my time. Maybe when the ball swings, guys are kind of late in rotations, and now this is kind of my time to take advantage of stuff. Albert, have you seen any of that stuff from Jaquez this year?
First off, I want to say, and this is something that, once again, just being able to see him there on the floor. So during warmups for every single game, they end like the drills portion of it with a Jaquez dunk. So he's kind of relied upon at UCLA to be the athletic guy to go up and put a sick dunk. Even though they have Peyton Watson, it's always Jaquez who will end that portion of the warm up with like a pretty sick dunk. So I did want to throw that in there as like maybe like a little bit of intel to what you were saying, Corey. I think he definitely is sneaky athletic. I definitely agree with you in terms of like the quickness too. Like, yeah, he doesn't have a sick like John Morant first step or anything like that, but he can get moving when he starts to get moving, and he can get up in the air higher than I think you realize. So once again, like my player comp for him is not going to be Gordon Hayward, but in that way where Gordon Hayward was sneaky athletic you remember early in his career, he had some sick blocks, some sick dunks, stuff like that. I think Jaquez can do a little bit of that. Obviously not as athletic or even as fluid as Hayward, in my opinion. But in terms of what you were saying, in terms of like shot creation and stuff, that's where I really agree. And what I wrote here is I think the thing that excites me the most and interests me the most about Jaquez is how multidimensional he is. I really like how you put it as he's kind of the old guy on the floor, but I imagine him as like, okay, like you look at the Phoenix Suns right now and they have Chris Paul and then like kind of the other old guy on that team, like Jay Crowder, that type of guy. We've seen Jay Crowder kind of be the old guy for a lot of different teams, a lot of title contending teams, like he did for Miami. Once again, that's not my comp either, but I feel like Jaquez is going to be able to do a little small ball four. He's going to be able to play the three for you. He's going to be able to guard smaller guards. He's going to have the physicality to wall up against some bigger dudes. There's a lot that he's going to be able to plug a lot of different holes by himself, which is kind of what you want sometimes. You want a Swiss Army knife. You want a multi-purpose cleaner. What the hell am I saying? But you get what I'm saying, right? And I think that's what's exciting about Jaquez. And I think in a draft like the one we're talking about, and every time we talk about this draft in our group chat, it's always about, it's sneaky, kind of like a really weak draft, but also a strong draft. Like it's a weird draft. And I think in a draft like this, if you can find a guy who can solve multiple problems for you, and he can do that effectively without being like a high volume, heavy, and he needs the ball all the time type of guy, that's where you get really excited about Jaquez.
Yeah, and I was thinking today, like when we were the weirdness of this draft, and is it kind of weak once you get to the middle part of it, or after a certain number? And I was kind of thinking of like context of that conversation and how we're day after day grinding tape of all these prospects, and sometimes we look at it and we're like, oh, this guy's playing well, so like, all right, he's now a prospect, or there's not enough guys playing well, so this is a weak draft, when maybe there's a guy like John Butler who's like not even on the radar a little bit, but is just like an NBA team is not looking at his season from a like production standpoint. Like they're looking at some of the flashes that he's shown, his physical profile, and whatever he's going to like look like post college season and workouts, interviews. And it's like, maybe he's a guy that we look at in the draft and it's like, oh wow, there were a lot of good players in this draft. It just so happened that some of them weren't necessarily the guys we were talking about. So that's something I have been kind of like toying with, because I do think there's some really interesting players in this draft that kind of fit the long 6'8", 6'9", can do multiple things. And maybe it doesn't mean there's going to be a ton of standouts. That's certainly possible. And a lot of people measure the success of a draft by how many, stars there are. But I do think there are interesting prospects. I do want to say that I love Jaquez Jr.'s footwork. and his craft. I think
Yes.
he's not like, Şengün level footwork when he gets towards the block, but I do think he's got pretty crafty footworks up and under, stuff like that. And then off ball activity. Kick it back to you, Albert. What do you think about him as a cutter, off ball mover in space?
Let's see. What's the best way to put it? I love it. I love it. Yeah, I really I love what you said about him being the old guy. He's a very savvy, intelligent player. And as you said, like he just knows where to be all the time. It's not like a once in a while thing. He always knows where to be, and it speaks to his intelligence. He's from Camarillo, California, which is like 10 miles from where I work. So he's from a good part of Southern California, and the dude it just shows it all the time on the floor. I think even when you watch him and how he works with Juzang, and Juzang is a guy that I really don't like very much. Rucker and I talked a lot about Juzang in person, and we're like, he might be like a G League guy and then go play in Europe type of dude. I'm not a big Juzang guy at all. But even when you watch Jaquez work with Juzang, I like that he doesn't really have an ego. You know, if I was Jaquez, I'd be like, bro, I'm better than you. Stop asking for the ball all the time. But Jaquez is not like that at all. No ego. He's always in the right spots. Also, Jaquez, awesome screener. I love Jaquez when he sets a screen. He knows how to use his strong base and his strong upper body. He sets some really, really good screens. And that kind of, once again, speaks to him and like his floor game and what he's able to provide, off the ball as a guy without the ball in his hands. He's really intelligent. The IQ is really high with him, and I love him.
Yeah, the screening, like I think he's going to be if he goes to a creative coach, like there's going to be some fun, like him as a screener, pick and pop, but then him also like slipping into the short roll and being able to make, plays. Because I do think that at times, he's a pretty fun playmaker. Stone, passing, playmaking, probably not a huge part of his game at the next level, but what have you seen from him as a floor reader this season?
Yeah, I actually like his passing. I think he's a very accurate passer. I'm a huge fan of just cerebral players, so that's probably why I'm so in on Jaquez like you guys. I had JRE like top 20 last year. I just love these kind of players. I think that part of it goes back to the creation. I just don't think he's somebody you're going to really look to be like any sort of initiator at the next level. So I think he's a good passer for what his role will probably be at the next level. I think that he's very accurate. Like I said, a lot of his passes are not as much as a premeditated thing as a lot of these cerebral guys usually are. I think he has a lot of read and react type passes that are really nice. But yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it just because, like I said, I think it's good for the role he'll be in. I just don't know if you want to really put more responsibility on him as sort of a creator and passer than is needed, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I think in a minimal passing role, he'll excel a lot in it.
No, that totally makes sense. I think that he's one of these guys that people like to call connectors. Like, he's going to be able to move the ball, get it to where it needs to go. He's not going to be walking the ball up the court, running high spread pick and roll and trying to get downhill like Luka or anything where he's, making weak side reads. But if the ball swings to him in the strong corner, he takes his guy off the bounce. Like, I do think he's capable of seeing guys cutting on the floor or taking advantage of wherever the help has overcommitted to. So again, it all goes back to just like the dude's just a fucking basketball player, and it's so hard to define that, and it's not sexy, and it's not like necessarily the most exciting thing to be threading on like Twitter or something, but it's like I would want that guy on my team. Like, I would love to play with him. He would just be a fun guy to play with because he's always going to like do what's the right thing is for the team, even if it isn't in the, most benefit of him. He's going to make the right play. Switching over to the other side of the ball. Because I think that for a player like him, this is another one of those things where it's going to make or break him in the league because he doesn't have the standout skill. He doesn't have Kispert shooting to fall back on, right? So he's if you're a jack of all trades guy, you probably have to be able to be a jack of all trades on both sides. Albert, on the ball, what position at the next level do you think he's going to best be able to defend?
I think he can guard 2 to 4. And the reason why I say 2 to 4 is because I've seen him guard some ones, and he's trying his best, but can't keep up with all of them. Definitely not. And as much as I want to love him and he prays on him, I have to be objective. And there are a couple times you see him get matched up on smaller guards, and they kind of send him the wrong way by a lot, and that's okay, because I don't think we have to keep we don't have to hold every damn prospect to like the best of the best always. I like the fact that he can be really versatile defensively. Some of the things that I wrote in my notes here, I think he's a functional athlete, like we talked about before. I think he has good feet defensively, but he does struggle against quicker guards. I like the discipline that I saw with his hands. That's something that I did want to give him praise for. And the fact is, if you look at his time in college, his fouls have come down. And this year, he's guarding a lot of the top guys on the other teams, and he's averaging 1.6 fouls per game, which is down from last year, which I think he deserves a lot of praise for. When I saw him play against Gonzaga, there were times he's matched up against Timmy. He's matched up against Holmgren. He's matched up against Strother, like all different guys, even like, I forgot their Hickman or whatever, all those guys. And the thing that I wanted to say, there were a couple times that he just kind of bullied Holmgren into mistakes. There was one where Holmgren was kind of driving baseline, and Jaquez just put his chest out, and Holmgren kind of flew out of bounds. And it wasn't a foul. He was just stronger than him, and those moments are cool. And then he was trying to guard Timmy, and Timmy, kind of gave him a hard time. But those are the little things you want to see. Can he guard those bigger guys? Can he guard the smaller guys? I think he can. So for me, like 2 to 4 is my answer. Because I think he can guard 2s. I think he can guard 3s and 4s. But, the 1s and the 5s, he might struggle a little bit. But that's okay. I still think he's a really solid defender, and he's going to be good. That's going to be one of his strengths on the next level.
Yeah, and even 2s, I think at the next level is not like the ideal position for me defensively. Like, I don't necessarily want him to like have to check Bradley Beal or one of those kind of guys for 20 minutes a game. Although this year the way Bradley Beal's shooting, just go under on the screens, right? But I do think that like him being kind of that 3-4 kind of guy that could really like guard up and be able to bang with guys and hold his ground. I think he's got a strong core, strong lower body to even match up with that good frame. Like you said, he's got quick hands, and I think he's got good timing. So I think that helps him there. The foot speed, like you said, I hope he doesn't get matched up on, these like NBA point guards that are just can go 0 to 60 in no time flat, which is significantly harder to guard than, Nolan Hickman in college with way less space. But I do think he's going to be able to play in a versatile, switchable scheme for teams and give good minutes. What about you, Stone? Where are you at with Jaquez defensively?
For the most part, I liked it. I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag with him in some regards. I agree with you guys. I think 3s and 4s is probably the ideal situation, although I tend to probably lean the other way, where I think he can guard up to maybe small ball 5s just because of his strength. I think he's really comfortable using it and knows how to use it pretty well for the most part. So I would be more comfortable with him guarding 5s than I would guarding 2s, most likely at the next level. I think screen navigation is something he has to work on a little bit. I think defensive screen navigation is sort of a flaw in his game right now that I think would greatly benefit him as a defender and allow him to sort of take another step in that regard. And I think part of what Albert was saying, where his decrease in fouls this year goes sort of hand in hand with the fact that he's closing out not super aggressively. I think that's sort of the cerebral part of his game coming into play, where he realizes that if he jumps on a lot of these jump shots to sort of contest it in the air, that he's just not going to be able to recover because of his lack of foot speed. So he plays it safe and generally does not jump on a lot of these contested jump shots. He puts his hands up, which is what he needs to do, but he won't go in the air a lot of the time because he just knows that he's not going to be able to recover with his lack of foot speed. And I think that is sort of what is maybe helping in terms of the lack of fouls. Also, I think that he's a pretty good gap closer on switches. If he's switching with his man defensively, I think a lot of the times he's really good at taking up that airspace between that switch. Something that I really liked with JRE last year as well. Probably the difference for me, the big difference on what would make Hawk is sort of like a real difference maker on that end would be sort of the pre-positioning for me. I think with ones and twos, especially if you want to project him as being able to guard those sort of guys, that he's going to need to get better in terms of pre-positioning his feet. A lot of the times I think he sort of hedges too aggressively on one way or another, and it allows the guard to get a step that he can't afford to lose on that guy. So if he's able to sort of hedge without giving up that step and angling his body a little bit differently so that he can use his strength to seal them off, I think that would greatly benefit him as a defender.
I agree. Let's talk about his off-ball defense. Albert, what do you think about Jaquez kind of as a team defender overall, which is, man, it's at the NBA level, team defense is really difficult, and for a guy like him, it's going to be just as important as one-on-one stuff. So, what do you think about him just overall on a string defense?
Yeah, no. So first off, I want to say I really liked Stone's breakdown right there. I feel like I learned so much. Like even like the gap stuff that you were talking about, I was thinking about. I was like, oh yeah, that's such a good point. Like I hadn't even thought about that with Jaquez. I definitely agree with that. I don't know, like something what as Stone was talking, and you're talking about the different things with him. I was wondering, like, do you guys feel like at times his defense gets affected by some of the load that he's carrying offensively? Like I think about that game against Gonzaga, and Juzang was really struggling. They couldn't really find offense anywhere, and Jaquez was like really trying to create something, whether it was off the dribble or just taking shots, or he was moving all over. He's doing a lot. And I was wondering, like, even in that game, I was standing with Rucker, and we were actually standing with like the play-by-play guy for Gonzaga, like the TV guy. I don't remember. Anyway, we're talking and stuff, but I was wondering if some of the team defense, like the off-ball defense stuff, I felt like there were times where I saw him kind of like trying to recharge and regain, like kind of recharge his battery, and there was like little lapses of focus. Like I remember he like let like a backdoor cut in, and I was like, oh, that's not the best. But I also wondered, like, oh, is he just kind of exhausted from trying to guard Timmy and Holmgren and all these guys? Was kind of my thought while watching some of UCLA's games. Wanted to ask you guys how you guys felt, if maybe that's like I don't know, like a small sample size type of thing that I saw, because I did feel like there were times when I don't want to say float because I don't believe he floats, but I think there were some times where there was like maybe like a lack of focus, maybe a lack of discipline, was how I felt. So wanted to get your feedback on that.
I think in that specific case, in like the Gonzaga game, that was the game where he took by far like his most amount of shots in the season. Like he's been a pretty low volume guy most of the year typically, and he had 22 shot attempts that night, whereas he's like really been over, I don't know, like 10, not too many other times. So I do think that probably has a little bit something to do with him looking tired, because like you said, he probably did feel the need to put the team on his back a little bit more in that circumstance. I do think that like his conditioning sometimes seems like something that is going to affect him at the next level. I think that he has like a good NBA frame, but I don't know if it's the perfect NBA body yet. Like I know like some of the video you took of him warming up, like I'm not like, he did look pretty fit and you saw him in person, when he was like warming up without the jersey and whatnot,
Right.
like, and so I'm sure he looked pretty good in person. It's hard to tell. Like when I saw Keegan Murray the other night, again he didn't warm up with his jersey on either. I was like, wow, I kind of can't believe he's as slim as he is, because he doesn't really come across that way on TV to me. Like, but he was like super lean. So sometimes maybe that the TV puts on the 10 extra pounds, whatever. But I think Jaquez is definitely going to have to like get more in NBA shape, and maybe
More cardio.
Maybe that's nutrition, whatever it is. Maybe more cardio. I don't know. Whatever his trainer, his draft trainer tells him to kind of do. I think that probably has to do with it sometimes too. I don't know if I'm alone there.
No, I 100% agree. Conditioning is something I think that Hawk is really going to have to work on at the next level. I think, for lack of a better term, he's a little bit doughy, it seems like.
Yeah.
This might sound a little weird, but I kind of wish I could see him with his shirt off, just to sort of see what his cores looks like, because I feel like a lot of the time, a lot of his strength-based advantages that he creates is with his chest and not so much with his core or with his torso. And I'm not quite sure how much of that has to do with conditioning or how much of that just has to be with him sort of learning to better utilize his body. I will say defensively, at the next level, I think a lot of the times he's going to be probably the fourth or fifth option for the team that he's drafted to while he's on the court. And I think that will sort of will be for the better, because he won't be expending as much energy offensively, which I think he carries quite a heavy load right now for UCLA, and it'll allow him to be a lot more of the hustle guy that he really is. And I think that's also, again, sort of playing a part into why he gets sort of burnt out at the end of games, because you notice it too with the shooting. A lot of times near the end of games, they're even flatter shots than they are when he started the game. So I do think conditioning is something with Jaquez to keep maybe an eye on, not necessarily be worried about, because it's generally just not a worry I have with a lot of NBA guys. Like to be in the NBA, you have to be sort of an elite athlete at some point, right? So I think he'll be fine in that regard, especially with the reduced role offensively.
I think, sorry,
Well,
really quickly,
no, go ahead,
quickly, Corey. I definitely think Stone, I know you're not saying that he's Sean May for sure. But the thing I will say though, guys, I saw him without his jersey on. He's wearing, like the Under Armour, like really tight tank top. He doesn't have a belly. He is really, really fit. I think what you guys are getting to, though, is not so much that he's like overweight or anything, but I really do think it might straight up just be the cardio aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like maybe the kid has to start marathon running or like just running laps in the neighborhood. I have no idea what it is, but like when you look at his yeah, but like when I saw his physique, like he might look doughy on TV, but he's not very doughy in person. Like I can actually confirm that. But I think what both of you guys are saying is like, maybe he's got to hit the treadmill a little bit more of the bike, a little bit more cardio. I think I'm definitely with you guys on that.
Yeah, that's an advantage. I'd love to be at as many games as I could. Right now, it's just not as much of an opportunity for me. But seeing him in person definitely could change my mind. I think that's one of the advantages of as opposed to watching film and being there, is you're able to sort of pick up on the smaller things that can make a difference at points. But like I said, I think with Jaquez, it's not a huge concern of mine, just because you're like PJ Tucker, for example. I'm not comparing them as players or anything, but he's a little thick around the edges, and he's done just fine for himself. He's able to keep up in overtime games and things, so it's not a huge concern of mine.
Yeah, he seems like he's one of the guys where like his cardio is like he'll go play pickup for a couple hours, and it's like a different thing than like a runner's build is, right? Like which I'm a big fan of, because doing cardio blows and playing pickup is really fun. So I do want to shout out his I feel like he has some really fun shot blocks. a lot of times. I think like
Yeah.
a lot of times you don't really see it coming, and then like he's not just getting a tip on the ball, he's like coming over and just like swatting somebody's shit, which is fun. And before we move on to like comps, whatever, I do also want to say with some of maybe I should have mentioned this back, like the shooting consistency and stuff. UCLA has had a weird season due to COVID. Like they had like a 3-week break, maybe like off,
Yeah.
just no games or whatever. And I do think that like when you're looking at some of the numbers and whatnot, that's like a weird thing to deal with in the middle of a basketball season that traditionally doesn't happen with postponements and stuff. And that's why some of the draft evaluations last year, this year, I think are going to, there's going to be some weird outlier stuff in a few years that we see from it, because so many of these guys are like just dealing with such weird developmental, just day to day, like they're just missing stuff that they would get consistently in more normal times. All right. If you're buying stock in Jaime Jaquez Jr., who may you have bought stock in previously? Albert, let's start with you.
All right, this is my I I've given some of the weirdest comps on this show, and I'm very proud of that. I have no shame in giving weird comps.
Yeah.
And I know that most of my comps come from the 90s and the early 2000s, and this is one of them. But I'm telling you guys, I feel the most confident about this comp out of all my other comps, because I think I finally nailed one like right on the head. Now, I thought of like modern day players. I thought of Eric Pascal. I thought of Jay Crowder. I thought of like minor league Gordon Hayward, like random things, right? My mind was all over the place. And I was like, no. Let me stick to my roots. I thought of a 90s guy who, and I want to really explain this to you guys, because I think he had two chapters to his career. He had a nice stint in Boston where, he was averaging like 15 points a game, was a really good player. And then he moved to Los Angeles and became like a supporting role player. I don't know if you guys have picked up who I'm trying to get at now, but he's a 3-time champion. He's been on TV a ton doing different shows. I'm talking about Rick Fox. I think Jaquez reminds me a lot of Rick Fox. Now, hear me out, okay? Rick Fox was never a superstar. He had a couple good seasons in Boston. Then he moved to LA, and then he was a supporting role player there, but a very important part of the Los Angeles Lakers winning 3 titles. He was never, the first 3-4 guys you mentioned on that team, but he was essential. He was a really solid bench player. He helped them out in a lot of different ways, whether it's defensively, even offensively. He'd go in and have a random dunk and move the ball and, work that triangle offense. My guy is Rick Fox, because I feel like Jaquez can have that type of career where he's going to be like a number 3, number 4, number 5 type of guy on a contender. He's going to be able to do a little things. Maybe he has one season where he averages 13, 14 points a game, maybe even up to a Rick Fox 15 points a game. But eventually, I think he'll end up on a really good team and support that team and do a lot of really good things. So this is weird. I get it. You guys may not agree with me, but this is the one I'm most proud of, because I really feel like he could have a Rick Fox type of career. I went deep in my bag this week.
Look, if Jaime Jaquez Jr. can have half of the IMDb credits that Rick Fox ended up having, then I think that is a big time win. I mean, Eddie Holes, he got game. Come on.
Wasn't he on Oz too?
He was.
I think so.
His IMDb is actually shockingly long. Like
Handsome dude.
Like even acting like in the last few years, he's got credits like shockingly long. Like I'm still scrolling from when I started talking about him on IMDb.
I think the only reason I know this is because of my mom, but I think he's like in half of the Hallmark movies that are on every Christmas.
Wow.
So.
Respect.
That's the only reason I know that's because of my mom, but
all right. Albert, you did it. You really did it. Stone, do you have any players that Jaquez reminds you of?
Yeah, so I'm generally not one for like 1v1 player comps, but I'll try my
Sure.
best to compare a role maybe. For me, I think Kenrich Williams sort of fits the bill really well. Somebody who's good at or not everything, good at a lot of things and not necessarily bad at a lot either. Who you feel comfortable putting out there for 20, 25 minutes a game and giving you positive contributions in various areas. I think sort of a lot can be said for the same with Jaquez. Another guy, again, not a 1v1 comp, is JRE from last cycle, who I already mentioned. A lot to do with just a very cerebral player. He uses their strength very well with a lack of foot speed. I think there's some parallels there, but again, it's not necessarily a 1v1 comp with those two guys either.
Yeah, and you know,
It's good.
1v1 comps are not the right way to evaluate
Yeah.
anybody because you
Yeah.
know cloning isn't real. So yeah, for me, like I went a lot less creative, certainly than Albert. But I do think because I'm big on movement and just kinesthetics, and I really think Jaquez moves very similarly to Gordon Hayward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gordon Hayward is he was an all-star level player, probably like a low level, like all NBA third team kind of guy at his peak. So I'm definitely not projecting that on Jaquez. But when I watch him on the court, the way he gets around, gets to some of his spots and whatnot, really reminds me of Gordon Hayward. Like I said, not the good version, maybe like the version that was post injury in Boston, kind of figuring himself out, but was still able to kind of contribute and do some things. I think Jaquez will probably look a little bit more decisive in what he does than that version of Gordon Hayward who was trying to figure himself out. But that kind of impact where you're not getting like really fancy, like the 26 and 5 type of stuff that Gordon Hayward was doing, but like maybe at Jaquez's peak, you're getting a guy who is, like you said, 12, 13 points per game. Maybe he's averaging 5. Like maybe he has stats similar to like kind of what he's doing now just in the league, which is just a little bit of everything, but definitely not leading your team, but definitely a guy who could be a contributor to, a deep playoff run down the line. Do you think that there's any volatility to a Jaquez pick? Stone.
No, in the sense that I think he's a very safe bet. Yes, in the sense that maybe you down the line regret not taking a player with higher upside. But in this class particularly, I know you guys mentioned sort of briefly that it may be a weaker class. I'm very, very low on this class as a whole. And I think taking somebody like Jaquez, you can feel really safe about being a positive role player on your team is worth taking in the first round. And I think from that standpoint, if you feel really safe about a player, the volatility level is pretty low.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I just know that he's going to play on good teams. Like, right. Yeah, you might miss out on a guy behind him that you take that, like maybe your franchise just was not in a position to take the risk. Like maybe you just needed a guy to kind of be another valuable player to a team instead of like striking out again, because it's for every guy who goes after him that maybe outperforms him at a certain point. Like there's going to be a bunch of guys that maybe teams swung on and missed on. So to me, he is a safe bet to be a solid NBA player. And I know I mentioned it on Twitter. Like it's really hard for me to think there's going to be 20 guys in this draft that are going to end up being better NBA players than him. Whether that comes before where he's selected or after, I feel like 20 is kind of that over-under of where I'm at. And granted, you're typically not getting 20 guys in a draft who are going to be around 10 years from now. So ultimately that might mean, he's one of those guys, but there's not many guys I would bet on long-term. All right, Albert, it's time.
Yeah.
You know what time it is.
Mhm.
Everybody's favorite segment. America's been waiting. It's time to sell me this pen on Jaime Jaquez Jr.
First off, I want to say I'm feeling a little rusty. I feel like I haven't done this in a while. I feel like Rucker decided to just come in and take this from me last week, like the scum that he is. But I love Rucker. I hope our listeners know there's no animosity between us, except we hate each other. But I will say with Jaime Jaquez, there's a lot to like. Listen, look, if you're a team, let's say you're drafting in the 18 to 20 range, 22 range, you're a contender. You're a playoff contender. You're either in the play-in game or you're getting knocked out in the first round. You need a little spark. You need a little extra juice to kind of get you over the hill, right? There are a lot of teams in that bracket that I don't want to mention because I don't want our fans giving us 3-star reviews on Apple Podcast for no reason. But I'll say this, okay? Jaquez is a guy that's going to come in. He's not going to demand the ball. He's not going to be a diva. He's going to quietly come in, do his job. As I mentioned, he's from Camarillo, California. He's a man of good character. I've never met him, but I know he's probably a man of good character from a good neighborhood. He's going to do really smart things on the floor. And eventually, over time, right, with development, with NBA coaching, NBA conditioning, after all the fat shaming that Stone did of Jaquez today, just kidding, with all that conditioning and dieting and all that stuff, Jaquez is going to become a guy who's going to be a very valuable contributor to a very, very good team. And so, look, if you're an NBA front office executive and you're interested in a player like that, and you should, or else you shouldn't be an executive, draft Jaquez. You're going to be happy with him. As Stone mentioned, he's not a high ceiling, one day he'll become Larry Bird. That's not Jaquez. But if you want a guy who's going to help you potentially win a championship one day, he's the type of guy you should take a bet on. So that's my spiel on Jaquez.
Solid head of hair. Not Josh Giddey level, but solid.
Mm-hmm.
He's pretty close to looking like a vaudevillain. He's got I think if he goes for like the curly mustache.
Yeah, I think really, he has to grow the stash out.
He's got to grow the stash out a little bit more so he can get the when you could start waxing it a little bit.
Yeah.
The goatee, he's got to shape it a little bit. That's where the the money is going to be for him.
Strong eyebrows.
Yeah.
I know people can't always see me on at least my podcast, but I feel like I'm sort of fitting this Jaquez bill a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say too, when Albert was sort of describing him, another sort of comp in terms of role that I think sort of fits with Jaquez is maybe a Torrey Craig.
Nice.
Someone who comes off the bench but gives you positive minutes pretty much the entirety that he's in the game. So in a minimized offensive role, but somebody who's going to bring the rebounding and defense and the hustle plays. So that's just a sort of a late name that popped in my head.
That's a good one.
Love it. All right, guys, we did it. Another episode of the Draftdaq. Before we get out of here, Stone, tell all of the people where they could find you on the WWWs.
Yeah, pretty much all of the draft work that I do, I'll be posting on my Twitter, which is @report_court. The majority of my draft work consists of the Upside Swings podcast that I host alongside 2 or sometimes 3 great co-hosts that it's always a blast doing. Coming up, we'll have tons of content on March Madness. What we usually do about 100 players that we break down as prospects, and then we'll do the 30 podcasts in 30 days where we talk about each team and what players would be good fits for them. We also have an Upside Swings TikTok and Twitter. You can follow at Upside Swings. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Let's go. Look at that.
That's awesome.
The TikToks.
TikTok.
Yeah.
That's where it's at. People sleep on it, man. The organic reach on that thing is crazy. It's crazy.
For sure.
I did a video about Corey Kispert that had over 40,000 views on Corey Kispert.
People love white shooters, man.
There's no reason for that. Albert, where can the people on the internet find you?
You can find me at Alberto Gim on Twitter, crying about the Knicks constantly. You can find me at GTG NBA. I want to do something before we go. I want to do something that I rarely ever do, if ever. Wanted to give a shout out to somebody other than us. So I'm wearing this hoodie here. I don't know if you guys can tell. This is a hoodie sold by NBA Paint. I'm sure you guys know the NBA Paint Twitter account. This is an RJ Carrot hoodie, which is freaking brilliant. It's awesome. And I had to buy a hoodie, and I messaged him on Twitter because I sent the freaking wrong address, and he was super cool. He hooked me up, and he's like, bro, thanks for the support, blah, blah, blah. Really cool guy. But just wanted to give him a shout out because this hoodie is like so freaking cool. And I give this shout out to NBA Paint. I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but I give the shout out to say for our fans out there, no ceilings. We're going to have merch too. It's coming.
Yes.
We don't know when, but it's coming. So when it does, please spend your dollars with us. And so that's it for me.
I love the NBA Paint. He just NBA on TNT the other night did the whole show. I'm not gonna lie, you got the whole LA streetwear scene out there. I thought it was like it was Anwar Carrots, that brand out there on Fairfax. That's what I thought it was, but that's dope too. RJ Carrots is cool,
Maybe Jaquez will be on an NBA Paint merch one day.
Ooh, yeah.
We have to think of a pun eventually.
I'm sure there's one that he's probably so good. He's probably just got a million of them. But like I said,
it's like a hawk, like a bird, like a hawk.
Hawk,
yeah, there you go.
Get it. There you go. You make it the little, the beard and the mustache.
Yeah,
it's got to get on it. It's branding. It's like the brow. And you can find me at Corey Tulaba on Twitter, at the NBA Draft Dude on YouTube and on TikTok. Guys, it's time. If you haven't yet, give us a rating, man. On Apple, on Spotify now. You can give us on Spotify.
Hell yeah.
If you made it this far, why not? Support the show. Helps out a lot. If not, that's cool too. We appreciate you guys rocking with us. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until that time, we are out.